From the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, hi, and welcome to In Focus. We're glad that you could join us for our broadcast as we talk about some critical issues that are facing us. They hit us not only in Washington, D.C., but folks, they hit us right here on the local community level and throughout the state of Wisconsin as well. We're going to be hitting the topic of the Green New Deal and also its correlations with something known as Agenda 21. We'll be delving into those issues. Many of you are familiar with a piece of legislation that was introduced called House Resolution 109. It's known as the Green New Deal. It was introduced this past February by AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and this is something to create a Green New Deal. We're going to expose further what this is all about, but right away we saw a number of co-sponsors come on the legislation. Some 93 individuals added their name to this, saying that they wanted to be a part of this. Also in the Senate, we saw an identical piece of legislation that was introduced. It is Senate Resolution number 59. There were 12 co-sponsors, and it's something also that had a vote that failed quite miserably in the U.S. Senate. Our guest today has reviewed this legislation and has reviewed it in light of Agenda 21, the Agenda 2030, and we'll delve into those topics as well. But we'd like to welcome to our set here Tom DeWeese, president of the American Policy Center. He's one of the nation's leading advocates of individual liberty, free enterprise, private property rights, personal privacy, back to basics education, American sovereignty and independence, and protecting our constitutionally guaranteed rights. He's the author of a couple of books here, one of which is called Erase. It's a political thriller that he's written, as well as Sustainable. And this book is the War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. Tom, welcome to Milwaukee. Good to have you here.
Thanks. Great to be with you. Appreciate it.
Tom, we've got a lot to unpack, and this topic of the Green New Deal, this House Resolution 109, Agenda 21, and so forth. And I think it's perhaps best for us to begin with Agenda 21, just giving some understanding what this thing is. There are people who are watching that have no idea of what Agenda 21 is.
Sure, yeah. The United Nations has had, over the years, lots and lots of meetings, and they come up with all kinds of treaties and policy statements and so forth. And during the 1980s, they did a lot of these meetings. And finally, in 1992, they put together what they called the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Mm-hmm. And at this summit, there were 50,000 delegates. These were all the heads of state, pretty much, in the world. George H.W. Bush was there, and leaders of other countries. And, of course, a lot of the diplomats from the United Nations, leaders there. And what made up that body of 50,000, basically, were non-governmental organizations. Non-governmental organizations are sanctioned by the UN. They're private organizations that have their own agendas, and they work behind the scenes. And they put documents together, they put policies together based on their own agendas. And they make their way through the process and eventually become one of these policy papers. Well, in this case, they put together what they called the Agenda for the 21st Century. This is where we're going to go in the world. And that became known short as Agenda 21. And what it does is affect every single aspect of our lives, our energy use, how we build our buildings, our driving our cars, on and on and on like mm-hmm. that. Every decision basically we make in our lives is based on the environment, how that operates. And one of the interesting things about that, and we'll get into this later, but just to mention it here, when they make us decide everything based on the environment doesn't follow political boundaries. So, a river flows through a whole lot of counties and a lot of cities and so forth, and you have, the corridors of how the environment runs through, mm-hmm. And so this became very advantageous to what they called Agenda 21 was a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society.
Wow.
And I mean, that says it all. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to reorganize human society, getting rid of pre-established political boundaries, which also includes your yard, the boundaries of your property, that's what they've done, and systematically they are tearing those things down under the guise of Agenda 21 and protecting the environment.
And when you say everything, I mean, you're talking about where we live, what we eat, how we get back and forth, our transportation system, our whole infrastructure. You're talking, it's pretty comprehensive on those aspects.
Comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. Yep.
When you first started speaking out about Agenda 21, you were really branded as being a wacko, a conspiracy theorist, a scaremonger. You were sometimes called an extremist. You were called even dangerous at times. But the liberal left has perhaps provided no greater illustration than what we have in this Green New Deal, this House Resolution 109.
I am very thankful for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I've jokingly said she's done more in 3 months than I've been able to do in 27 years to tell people how scary this is. She didn't mean to do that, but that's what she's doing. And so finally, after all these years of, yes, they've branded me all these things. The Southern Poverty Law Center did 4 separate reports on me. I'm on the hate list. I hate government.
By the way, they're kind of in trouble themselves right now.
Yeah. Things come around. But all of a sudden, we are having a national discussion on the very issues that I've been warning about for 27 years. And so that's not all bad. People are beginning to really see how awful this really is.
And we'll be delving into it, but in regard to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, you have called her a created product. What do you mean by that?
Well, you don't just stop bartending and become a media sensation across the nation or throughout the world. There are all kinds of power structures behind her. And they all basically, here goes the conspiracy theory, they all basically lead to George Soros. There are several different organizations that are behind her, and one of them, her chief of staff, is the head of it. What's it called? Democracy? I forget the exact name of it. But their purpose is to recruit candidates to run for Congress and other levels of government who are pushing these issues. There's another one that's...
Is that like Justice Democrats and also what was it called, the New Consensus?
Yeah, Justice Democrats is the one I was trying to think of. Okay. And the New Consensus, this is to focus on the getting people to totally accept the global warming issue, climate change issue, and they're all focusing on recruiting candidates to run on these issues and get into Congress and other levels of government to promote these ideas.
So there's a machine behind her.
Absolutely a machine, yeah.
Wow.
And these lead to organizations like Black Lives Matter, and remember the old Occupy Wall Street movement and so forth. They're all kind of interconnected and still pushing for the same things.
Yeah, there have been so many gaffes that have come from her that, she's become the laughingstock in some of her understandings of how a bill becomes a law and how government works and just the concepts that she has regarding a government itself. And so one would have to say there is got to be something behind her in advancing some of these pieces of legislation. Tom, you've warned that, as we mentioned, Agenda 21 controlling every aspect of our lives, the type of jobs we have, where we live, how we get back and forth to work, etc. And as you have examined this Green New Deal, you find it really addresses those various areas. How does a Green New Deal advance Agenda 21? How does this really take control over the population?
Well, first of all, where Agenda 21 was what they called a soft law policy. In other words, it was not a treaty, and the Senate didn't have to ratify it. So they continue, this is the way they attack me on this as well, it's just a voluntary thing, it's just an idea, it's just a good suggestion. That, of course, changed when Bill Clinton became president. He put together the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and on that council were some of these same NGO groups, Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, others that helped write it, agencies, I think 12 different federal agencies were on it, and several global corporations were on it, and their purpose was to make it law across the country, or at least regulations through these agencies and grant programs, that sort of thing. But now with this resolution, now they're moving to make it, specifically a law that has to be done. And so that makes it much different. It's one thing to be going through the process of creating regulations that have to do this. Those can be rolled back. But now they're moving to make it law of the land, which Agenda 21 was never done.
So how does this control things like where we live? How does it impact that?
Well, one of the things it calls for is that every single building in America needs to be either torn down or somehow retooled so that it uses a specific designation of energy and uses certain building materials, a certain size. And what's interesting about that is, and one of the things we have to understand, that the Green New Deal, a whole lot of the provisions in it, almost 50% of them are already being put in place one way or another. And for example, mentioning the buildings, there is an NGO organization called there's one called What Works Cities, which puts these takes all these issues from different cities and brings them into other cities, saying, well, this is what we did here, this is what we did here, we got the money for you, we do all that, and they design it. There's another one called Form-Based Codes. Form-based codes is exactly what's called for in the Green New Deal. Every building has to look alike, it's built alike, and pretty much the same size and so forth. So they always talk about diversity and how they want diversity in everything, and yet everything is wiping out diversity to where everything is one way. And so here we have 50 states that all have their own character, they all have their own look and so forth, and that's all being wiped out by this into a one-size-fits-all situation.
I've got here a newspaper clipping from, more than a clipping, it's a section, the business section from Sunday, April 28th, and this is a new concept for city housing. They talk about this upscale high-rise, including lower-income renters, high-income individuals as well, but getting everybody together in these high-rises. And I understand this is not something unique to just Milwaukee, but this concept is actually taking a foothold in numerous cities.
It is. Every single city is implementing something like this. We have these comprehensive plans that are being put in place in almost every single community in the country. You have the move towards regionalism, where non-elected regional councils that'll cover as many as 15 or 18 counties, where they're all putting all one-size-fits-all programs in place. They're getting those grants from HUD and the EPA and Department of Transportation and others, and they all dictate, here's what you have to do. You take this grant, it's what you have to do. So this has been going on anyway. And smart growth, and this is what this is really leading to, the smart growth plans of sustainable development. Sustainable development is the policy of Agenda 21. And you hear it everywhere. Everything's sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. The way our food is produced, this is sustainable. The way our buildings are built, sustainable. And that's the code word, too. The minute you hear that word, this is what they're putting in place.
Have your ears perk up.
Absolutely. And one of the tenets of this smart growth is the program of putting sustainable development in place. What they do is they basically put a line around the city. It's a artificial, it's an imaginary line, but technically and probably legally, they put that around there. And they say no growth will take place outside of this line. That's urban sprawl. We can't have that. This is a no growth boundary line. And now, once you've done that, inside the city, what happens? The city doesn't grow out, but the population grows itself. What happens when that happens and you can't grow out? The only thing you can do is grow up. Now they start telling us, well, there's no room for single-family homes in their yards. And so, as you just showed, these high-rises are what come in and take the place of it. And what's happening in Minnesota and Minneapolis, the mayor there has declared that zoning to protect single-family homes is racist, that these people are cutting themselves out of the rest of society, and they live in their own little kingdoms. You know, that's you and your home we're talking about here. Did you know you're living in your own little fiefdom?
You know, this is a direct attack upon private property rights.
Yeah, well, that's the number one point here. Under sustainable development, the Green New Deal, that there are no private property rights. There is no private property. That everything becomes under the control of the government. You may still have the right to pay your mortgage and pay your taxes, but every other decision about your property is made by somebody else. Now they have upped it to a direct attack on the single-family homes themselves, because now you'll hear the Speaker of the House of Oregon is taking up this exact same issue, and she's saying that there is a housing crisis that we've got to address, and the only way we can address it is there's no room for these single-family homes. We've got to have these high-rises so that we have enough housing for people. Now, interestingly, as they rise higher and higher, eventually you're going to get so high, because if you go too high, then you can't breathe because you're above the atmosphere, so you can't keep doing that. So what happens then? Well, now you begin to cut the size of the apartments in them. And what do you get when you do that? One of the things that they're talking about is apartments would only be 350 square feet.
My.
So again, like this. Now, as you were showing in that article, they're talking about mixing everything together. They, you know, every income level, along with businesses and so forth. The reason they want to put offices in there and put everybody together is so that you are not driving cars. You're walking to work, or you're riding a bike to the grocery or something like that. And this is the other attack. Well, the Green New Deal is talking about elimination of the internal combustion engine. And what you'll see happen with this, you say, well, how are they going to do that? What you'll see happen is eventually they will say no more after a certain date can be produced. And everything will have to be some kind of sort of electric car or something. You already have in California, where they are dictating that, I think it was within 10 years, I think they said, there won't be any other kind of electricity, any other kind of power except wind and solar power.
And let me just put a side note here, and that is we have just seen come on Earth Day here in the state of Wisconsin, an initiative by Republicans to have these electric charging stations along the highways in the state of Wisconsin. And many were shocked by this, and who's seeking to be more environmentally friendly, who's trying to enact the Green New Deal more, is it coming from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party?
This is a very interesting thing that's happened here. What you have seen in the introduction of the Green New Deal is the people behind that. It's not just AOC, but others who deliberately have done this, and this is not just in America, it's all over the world. This is a major move. Now, understand their frustration that for 27 years they've been trying to get Agenda 21 Sustainable Development fully implemented. And they haven't gotten that done yet. There's a frustration there. There's also a fear, because more and more people are starting to figure out what this is about. They've got to move. They've got to move. So what they've done with the Green New Deal is you kind of do it in a football play. They have made a long pass, taking it way beyond anything anybody ever talked about before, anything anybody ever experienced. So they've moved it miles down the road. And now the Republicans have responded with, oh, golly, we can't do that, but we can do this. The Republicans have walked into a well-laid trap, and they are moving on it just as fast as they can. What's happened now, this has become a discussion in every level of government across the country, and now you've got several congressmen, Republicans, that are starting to introduce certain legislation to put this in place. Matt Gaetz in Florida is working on, he hasn't introduced it yet, but he's working on what he calls Green New Deal Light.
Oh my.
His bill is only 10% less than AOC's. But we're being reasonable here. We can't go all that way, but we can be reasonable. Meanwhile, Lamar Alexander in the Senate from Tennessee is introducing what he calls the new Marshall Plan, and working on cutting back on specific kinds of energy use. But let's be reasonable here, and so we're not going to cut out all kinds of energy here. We're not going to do what AOC wants to do, where we just have wind and solar. We can still allow certain kinds of natural gas, for example, that kind of thing. And so this is...
But the eventual end is getting to where AOC wants to take us.
Exactly. It is a brilliant ploy when you are in a negotiation to bring to the table the most radical thing you can, way beyond anything you talked about before, anybody expected, and the other side is sitting there looking dumbfounded saying, oh, golly, we can't do that. But now they want to, we don't want to be unreasonable here, so, well, we can meet you halfway.
Yeah.
Well, halfway, just move 4 miles down the road.
Right. And then the future halfway is going to come again. I mean, it's
Sure.
incremental that happens that way.
They will come again. Yeah.
Tom DeWeese is our guest here on In Focus, author of the book Sustainable, dealing with the war on free enterprise, certainly that of private property and individuals. We're discussing Agenda 21, the Green New Deal, sustainable development, smart growth. It's all tied in together here. And Tom, we're in the midst of that transportation issue that we're discussing, but trying to get rid of the combustible engine. Air travel as well is in jeopardy with the Green New Deal.
Yeah, she's come right out and talked about, we're not going to, airplanes are polluting the skies and using energy and so forth. We do that. It is just amazing to watch step by step how they're moving us back into the caveman days. It's anything that man has produced is suddenly in question. Do we need this? Can we get rid of this? And that's just how radical it is.
I know you have also warned about this desire to control all our energy, and let's enter in the whole aspect of smart meters and their intended purpose as well.
Yeah. First of all, I had an expert explain to me that one of the urgencies behind getting these smart meters put in place is that as they have brought wind and solar power onto the grid, it is not reliable. The sun don't shine and the wind don't blow. You got it. And so in peak usage times, they are there's a great possibility that the grid will collapse and we'll have blackouts and so forth. So one of the purposes of getting these smart meters, forcing them in place, and they've become so unreasonable when people say, I don't want one. Some people have had their power shut off. Some people have had their, they actually are just forced to have them. And because there's a panic. We have to do this because the smart meter reads, they control your meter with that. And now there are other electrical appliances that you buy, washers, dryers, ranges, and so forth, that have a chip in it that can talk to the meter. So they can control the use of all of those things. And so what happens then, I've had many people tell me in the wintertime, the coldest days, they can't get their temperature up above 50 or 60 degrees. In the summertime, there's no air conditioning. And so they're controlling the use of power. But at the same time, they're telling us they're saving us money. But in every case, the power costs have gone up instead.
Now, you have actually developed, and we don't have time to get into smart meters in total, but you've got a special report that you've drafted, Special Report, Sustainable Development and Control of Energy, the Growing Battle Over Smart Meters. You have this available on your website for people to download. I
do, yes. You can download it for free, or for $5 you can buy the booklet, but yeah, it's on there.
Okay, and give us your website.
It's AmericanPolicy.org. And on there we have an extensive archive of articles I've written on all these issues we're talking about, and you can get those on there, and several products that we have, the books and so forth are there.
Let's enter in the American Planning Association to this as well, because that is something that is being discussed on Common Council levels and communities. State governments are talking about American Planning Association. How do they figure into all of this?
Yeah. American Planning Association is the largest of all. There are lots of planning groups, but they all kind of, there's a planners network that they're all kind of part of. And as I mentioned, these grants that are coming out of HUD and EPA and Department of Transportation and so forth, there are every single issue that we talk about, whether it's bike trails, or it's cutting back on energy use, or it's what kind of materials you use on your home, or it's future development, anything like that. Every one of those issues have their own NGO organization that focuses on that and knows how to promote it, knows how to get your city councils, county commissioners to accept it, and knows how to get the grant money for it. American Planning Association is one of these, and they put these plans together. And I actually find it very interesting dealing with the American Planning Association, because they are terrified that we're going to find out what the game is. And they keep changing the rules as they go along, or changing how they do things. First of all, they're right there in almost every single community. They're there talking to your city councilmen, your county commissioners about planning. And they hold these public meetings, and how we're going to get the community to back our planning, and they use these facilitators who are trained in psychology. They know what the end result's going to be. They know where they're headed with this, and they are able to lead the discussion down to have everybody agree, oh, we like planning. One of the questions they'll ask is they'll hold up photographs of a dingy, area of town where everything is kind of dilapidated and so forth, and then they'll show a picture of a beautiful new, like you had in the photo, the high rise and all that. And which one do you like? Well, I like the pretty one, please. Oh, you support planning, and so this is how they operate. And when we started to put pressure on and started to expose what they're doing a few years back, they went into a real panic. The first thing they did was put a facts and stuff about Agenda 21. Here's things that just aren't true. People are spreading this. The other thing they did was they put together a boot camp for their planners to train them how to deal with us. And they said they put together this glossary for the public, and these are words you shouldn't use because this makes the opposition see red.
Wow.
And words like sustainable, facilitate, smart growth, all the words that they have to have, to talk about these things.
Right.
And I've joked that eventually they're going to have to give their presentations in sign language because they won't have any words left. This shows you the honesty and the dishonesty behind what they're doing. They don't want the American public to know what's really behind what their programs are.
And yet I know that the American Planning Association is active in, I'm guessing, every single state. I just saw here in the state of Wisconsin, they're having their big state conference in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, coming up this October 2019. And I'm assuming this is going on in states all across, but when you look at some of the workshops and meetings and topics, it falls right into Agenda 21, falls right into the principles we see in the Green New Deal.
Absolutely. They say in the Planners Network website, they've got a description on there, and it's saying that planning is, among other things, is allocation of resources, which the free market has been unable to do. That is an absolute attack on free market, economies. So what does that leave you? That means the planning that they're putting together, by their own admission, is socialism.
My. And yet we are seeing the rise of socialism and socialistic thought taking place. The ideas of Bernie Sanders are taking root and taking a foothold, especially in the millennial age group, the college campuses, universities scene. We're hearing a cry for socialism like we've not. I mean, are they blinded to what's going on in Venezuela?
Yeah, you've never seen anyone try to escape America, to run away or any other free market country. So it's always interesting how they do that. But the kids today coming out of the school system, I mean, it's tragic what's happening. They, first of all, I know when I turned 16, I needed to get a driver's license immediately. I wanted the freedom. I wanted to be in that car. Kids today couldn't care less, a lot of them, about getting a driver's license and driving. Why? Because they've had it pounded in their brains that is damaging the environment. They have no interest in having a single-family home. And so these high-rises and so forth, they have been, just kind of molded to accept this world that's being built for them.
Let's talk about food supply as well, because this is part of this Green New Deal. This House Resolution 109 is, even dealing with our food supply, the eating of red meat, and we're seeing things like this really catch on fire across the nation.
Yeah. To my surprise, I got involved with some folks, started out in Oklahoma, who are cattlemen. And I learned that there is now a global sustainable beef roundtable that is beginning to control the beef industry. And who is behind this? The World Wildlife Fund. World Wildlife Fund is one of the top 3 environmental organizations in the world, and they have said specifically that something needed to save the earth is to cut back on beef consumption. And yet these people have moved into the beef industry, and cattlemen. What they do, they've set up through this roundtable a series of regulations on how cattle are to be raised and treated. And the American beef industry, the American cattlemen, know well how to raise cattle, and we've had the highest standard of that product and the beef in the world. The first thing they did was they removed any labeling of the nation of origin of where the beef is coming from. Now they are systematically pushing American cattlemen out of business and getting beef from other countries. We've suddenly started to see reports come up in the news about danger in certain beef products, salmonella, things like that, coming out into that. Why? We don't know where it came from. What they've done is there are, I think it's 4 different packing companies in the country that control the market. The cattlemen don't control the market. They bring their beef to the packing companies. The packing companies are the ones demanding these sustainable policies. This is Tyson, Cargill, there's one called JBS, and they are controlling all this. Well, they are now, as they systematically put American beef out of business, they're getting their beef from these other countries, and they're lowering the prices. The cattlemen tried to fight back by getting the establishment of a new packing company that was all state-of-the-art and just as good as it can be. This roundtable and Cargill and Tyson and so forth lowered their prices to the point they put that new operation out of business.
Aye.
And that's what happens. Tyson's in the chicken industry send all of their chicken to China to be processed and then send them back. Here, there's a fresh product for you. This is
There's also some carbon footprint there too.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the sustainable world of globalism, and one of the great dangers that they see in the whole sustainable process is that people who live in the rural areas are a danger because they're independent. These are people who understand that the food doesn't come from Safeway,
right.
And they know how to live. They could live on their own and not have to have, all the things we have to have in the cities to live. And that's a great danger to them because that's an independence that cannot be.
We look at our own state right now, Tom, and the dairy industry, and we see what's happening, the closing down of the family farms. I mean, there are record percentages of closings of these family farms in the dairy industry, greater than before in our history. And we're seeing that whole aspect of rural Wisconsin being under attack at this time.
Exactly. And here Wisconsin has, more dairy cows than any state in the union, and so you're absolutely right in the path of all this. And cutting back on the argument that they use on the cattle industry, and I'm sure on the dairy industry as well, the land that is used for the grazing of these animals could feed more people if we just use that land to grow wheat and soy. So it no longer becomes a matter of the quality or a choice of what you want to eat. It becomes a matter of survival. Right. Every single policy based on sustainable development is sold as an emergency, survival. And so we cut back on any kind of luxuries, any kind of things that make our lives more comfortable. Private property is the means, probably the only real means of private property ownership to eradicate poverty. And we have all these poverty programs. But what do we have as a result of these poverty programs? It's redistribution of wealth. It's taking money out of your pocket, put it in somebody else's pocket. Tomorrow they need some more, take some more from you. Pretty soon you're going to need some help. And what we end up with all these poverty programs based on redistribution of wealth is more poverty. The reason the United States became such a wealthy nation with the highest standard of living of any nation on earth so quickly was because of private property ownership. And that is one of the main targets of sustainable development, getting rid of that. And the high rises and where that's going, all rentals and so forth, they're attacking landlords and putting rental price controls on the rent, and they can't survive. What this is all leading to is everything will be government housing under sustainable development.
My. Tom, some of the groups that you've mentioned, the Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund, ICLEI is another, this American Planning Association. Everything that we hear from these organizations is that this is all about environmental protection. We need to protect the environment. And yet you call this Green New Deal a Trojan horse. It's pure socialism. Socialism masquerading as environmentalism. And I really believe this is important for people to understand, because people can be guilted into believing, well, yes, we have to make sure we're protecting the environment. And I mean, the Bible tells us we are stewards of creation, but that creation is not to have dominance over the mankind as well. But we're seeing just a reverse take place with this environmental thought, which is masquerading as true socialism.
Absolutely. And if they began to, the forces behind this, if they wanted to sell it to us as socialism right from the start, that this is what our goal is, what we're going to do, we would have rejected that. And they knew that. And, as we've gone through history, there have always been forces that wanted to rule the earth. And, we had, the Hitlers and the Stalin and Lenin and all these people, Bonaparte, everybody. They never really succeeded in taking over the world, but that was their goal. But what they would do is put armies together, and they would break things and kill people and to subjugate people. What these people have managed to do, and their goal is world domination, what they've managed to do is come up with a message that gets the people that they want to dominate, to subjugate, to help them do it, to pull the Trojan horse into the city walls. The message, the powerful message they came up with was the threat of environmental Armageddon. It doesn't matter what rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. That's the argument they've used. That's what's behind the Green New Deal. That's what's behind Agenda 21. All of it is leading towards totalitarianism, control of our lives, destruction of our culture and our system of government, because as I mentioned, the non-elected regional councils and so forth. That is taking away from your ability to elect a city councilman or a county commissioner or a mayor or whatever to do what you want the city to do. Well, no, they're in this regional government, and we have to go along with what the other 15 counties want to do.
Alarmism seems to be very much a part of this too. Everything is, the crisis that you talked about. AOC has come out and said the world is gonna end in 12 years
now we got 10.
If we don't change this. And she made that statement in January 2019. So we're in May. So I guess now we're 11 years, 8 months or something. And predictions came out years before. We heard the predictions of Al Gore and others, but they really focus in on this alarmism. Unless we act now, when we put all these pieces of the puzzle into play, life will not go on as we know it today.
Exactly. And well, it's in fact, if you want to take a look at what life was like, say, in the 1950s versus what we have today, it already has changed drastically. And our expectations, we used to, every generation was going to do better and, be more prosperous and so forth. And that was true all the way up until just recently. And now you've got people who, 12 years is going to be over. So we have no hope. This whole thing based on emergency, based on hopelessness, based on, we are moving very rapidly back into the caveman days where everything that man does damages the earth. And eventually, when we're all in the cave and we have a campfire, they're going to stomp that out too, because, well, you can't have that. That's, you're burning wood. Mm-hmm. That wood has a right to live. It's
well, their personhood given to things like that, like to trees. This House Resolution 109 and the Green New Deal, we saw what happened. We had Mitch McConnell say, okay, we're going to put this forth for a vote, and all of a sudden it's, no, you can't do that. You're making a mockery of this, and they actually did hold a vote, Tom, as they found 0 in favor of it. All the Democrats voted present for this, 57 opposed. So does that mean that this thing is all over and done with? There's nothing, we're just throwing a lot of words out into the air? Is it?
No, that goes back to what I said. They walked right into a trap with that. What you have now are discussions going on at every level of government. Let's take New York City. Mayor de Blasio has just introduced, they've got a package of 10 different bills, and they voted, what was it, some huge 57-4 or something like that, some huge vote in the city council to put these things in place, their own Green New Deal. He's going to ban glass skyscrapers. He's going to ban hot dogs.
Meatless Mondays in the schools.
Yeah.
I mean, all government buildings, you won't be able to serve.
Yeah. She introduced this bill, and we now have this massive debate going on that wasn't there before. As I said in the very beginning, there was no discussion on Agenda 21. It was all, that's just crazy, that's just a conspiracy theory, end of discussion. Now, everywhere we turn, they're moving, but they're putting these things in place. And what I don't understand is, where are the airline industries? Where are the car manufacturers? The National Association of Realtors? What product are they going to have left to sell if they don't get on board and start to fight this thing? But we've gotten so akin to just saying, yep, okay, whatever, and this is an absolute attack on everything this nation was founded on. The ideals of freedom, the ideals of free enterprise, the ideals of limited government are now scorned and thrown aside because we have environmental Armageddon. So it doesn't matter what rights you have. And this has become the dominant debate.
Tom DeWeese is with us here today. Again, his book is called Sustainable, and just packed with information that you need to know about. It is available through his website, as well as a lot of information on his site, and that is simply AmericanPolicy.org, AmericanPolicy.org. I don't want to just talk doom and gloom. I want to talk about some solutions too. Is there hope in all of this? Is there a way that people can get engaged and make a difference, or are we on a roller coaster that just is not coming back up again?
Well, actually, I think I said at the very beginning, I'm very grateful for her for making this such an issue. People are beginning to get it. I am getting more phone calls from elected officials than I ever got in the last 27 years saying, what do I do? Activists in local communities, I travel the country teaching them what they can do. I'm going to do it today. And so more and more people are becoming aware of all this. And I'm actually energized by it, because they're seeing there is a way to go after this. And one of the things, we always get excited about presidential campaigns and then maybe congressional campaigns and stuff, but our founding fathers created this nation so that the local level had the most influence on us. Now, that isn't necessarily true today because of Congress and everything, but it is still true. The reason for that was we could get our hands on to our elected officials, our local officials, and say, Charlie, what are you doing here? That's still true. Now, the funny thing is, the left that is pushing all this understand that. They went into the local communities, and they have pushed these programs there. But we still can begin to push back there. And that's what I'm trying to teach people, how to do, and get people to run for local city council and stuff. These NGO groups and a lot of groups like the National Conference of Mayors and the League of Cities and groups like that, people think these are government organizations. They're not. They are 501c3 private organizations. These organizations have no power whatsoever unless your local elected officials give it to them. And the first thing we do when we elect a city councilman or a county commissioner is send them off to the national organization. And what do they hear there? They are hearing these same NGOs, the Nature Conservancy and Sierra Club and so forth, that are pushing these programs, American Planning Association. They are hearing them from the podium, and they come home and they begin to believe this is the proper role of government. We stop doing that and begin to take back our local elections and get rid of these influences, then I believe that if you can, and really with it being so massive, it's so difficult to wrap your head around all these different issues. Let's make it easy. That's what I've done in my book. Focus on property rights. This is the kryptonite to sustainable development. If you can protect private property rights, they cannot implement sustainable development programs. So focus on that and your own property, and you can begin to stop this.
And this really does happen at that local level. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people, Tom, say, oh, spring elections, that's just local. These things really don't matter. They really do matter. They really do matter. And what's disheartening so many times is to go to the polls and see just one name on the ballot, and it's the same old names that we've seen before, but for individuals to actually get engaged, understand what the issues are, and by going to your site, by reading your book, they're going to know what these issues are, and so that when the words like smart growth and planning and sustainable are coming up, they're going to be attuned to what the game plan is behind those in order to make a difference. But even the attending of city council meetings and county board meetings, very, very critical to know what's happening in this community, because it happens at that small level, branches out across the state, and before you know it, it's well adopted as a nation.
Yeah, this is one of the things that the other side will say. I mean, the American Planning Association says, well, we had a public meeting. And what you find with these public meetings is the only people there are the NGOs, the very people behind it. Right. And you watch the documents that they put together, and your comprehensive plans and so forth. It will say, they will refer to these NGO groups as stakeholders. Well, we met with the stakeholders. They're not stakeholders. They're not even from your town. They're carpetbaggers. You're the stakeholders, and you're the one left holding the stakes. And so, this is, we have to be there. And one of the things that's happened here is government has gotten so big and so out of control that people feel that they can't make any kind of impact, so they don't go. But that's not true. Those people putting these things in place are terrified you're going to learn the truth, that you can stand up to them. And I've seen people finally doing this in certain places. We have a little town in Alabama, Biola Battery. Been there for 200 years, beautiful place. Environmentalists wanted to grab hold of this. And one of the industries they had there, 10 or 15 shipbuilding companies there. And these environmentalists moved in there, and they put a resolution or a plan together that they also had the grant money, everything, that was going to turn this into ecotourism. Well, this was an absolute attack on private property and so forth. Local people, the city council was ready to vote for it. Local people stood up, and in a very short period of time fighting this thing, they got a 5-0 vote to stop it. I can give you some stories across the country. These are people who are standing up and doing it. You've got to attend. You cannot save America sitting in your chair. You've got to get up and do this. It is your life that they are coming after, and you are not going to like the world that is created when they put all this in place. As
it relates to this Green New Deal and the many tentacles that come from this, I've seen some of your writings, and you have said this needs to be killed now or watch freedom die. Is it really that critical?
Yes. Take a look at everything we've talked about here, at every aspect of our lives, how we live, where we live, what we can eat, it's even getting into our families, what they've done to the school system. All of these things are pieces and parts of a revolution to completely change our society into a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of society. Keep that in mind. This is what they're after. And they sell it all as just local, local, local. take a look at your local comprehensive plan. Usually they have numbers like 2050, 2040, something like that behind them. And they will tell the local people decided this, we decided this. I can take you onto the internet, look at Jamaica 2050, Dubai 2050, different countries around it, the exact same language. Mm-hmm. That is not local. Right. That's the one thing they all have in common. Right. None of them are local.
Now, you mentioned schools, Tom, and let's take just a moment on this as well, because the very aspects of sustainable development, that's really being part of the brainwashing that's going on in our public education system as well.
Absolutely it is. And your child may bring home an algebra book or an English literature book or something. Look in that book. You will find all kinds of references to eco warriors, people trying to save the environment. So it's all propaganda. And what the education system really is about is behavior modification. And when they talk about having a computer program, for example, to just give your child, maybe your child learns a little slower than others, and well, we got a personalized computer program for them, and that'll help. We always were sold this under the Clinton administration, and oh, that'll really help our kids. What it really is they're asking these questions over and over again, and when they start to answer the question the way they want them to, oh, it's working. That's behavior modification. It is propaganda. I won't go into the whole story on it, but I came across something that told me what the education system is today. The education system is globally acceptable truth. That is what the American curriculum is. The people, there's an NGO in the UN selling this idea, globally acceptable truth, and what they say is the reason we have war and strife and poverty is because there is too much knowledge, and it makes it difficult for the average person to make decisions in their life. So we will promote globally acceptable truth and take that strife away from them. That is the American education system.
Well, Tom, this is why it's critical for people to get engaged now, why they have voice. That engagement happens on the local level, happens on the national level as well. And friends, just to, on this House Resolution 109, the Green New Deal, the very aspects of this, though the version perhaps introduced in the Senate is not going to go, there's other inner workings that is going on to promote so many of the concepts that are in these pieces of legislation. I want to just provide you a couple of phone numbers here today, and one is for the House of Representatives. You have a congressman or woman there that is there, some of which are watching right now, who actually espouse the very issues that are part of this House resolution, the Green New Deal. The main switchboard number is 202-225-3121. That's 202-225-3121. In the U.S. Senate, we have two senators, Senator Tammy Baldwin, 202-224-5653, and Senator Ron Johnson, 224-5323. These are direct numbers to their offices. And then also keep in mind, there is your city alderman, there is your mayor, there is your county supervisor, and certainly county executive. You got your state elected officials. On and on it goes. But this is really something, as you mentioned, that's reaching all levels of government at this time.
It is, and as I said before, they're promoting it on the lower level, in the local level, and that is where it's being put in place. And you really can have an impact on that and get it stopped. Stand up for your property. Stand up for your these things that are affecting you.
Yeah, and we're seeing right now issues in which people are seeking to make a difference in this, and yet we see the government encroaching and sometimes surprising things that are going on. California right now proposing the potential for restaurants to come on to a 1% tax that would go to the customers to fight global climate change. We see other efforts going on in other states to propagate these very matters. And then we also see municipalities. We see even the government coming on. Here's a 78-year-old veteran sent to prison, fined $130,000 for digging ponds on his property under the Obama EPA rulings that he was in violation of. All of these things are all intertwined. They're not just random things that are happening out there, but it's all part of the major plan.
Absolutely. As I said before, the rural areas are a target because people in the rural areas are independent. So how do you get people off the rural lands? You make it impossible to live there. and you control the water, you control the air, you control the grazing of the herds, all those kind of things. That's how they're doing it, and if that doesn't work, we'll tax them.
Right, right, yeah, and they're quite adept at that as well. We have just 2 minutes left here in the broadcast. What do you want to leave with our viewers tonight? What do you believe is the most important information they should know?
Well, I think the most important thing is you've got to get engaged, and you've got to go to these city council meetings and county commission meetings. You will hear things you wouldn't believe. And if you can start looking at those comprehensive plans that they're putting together in your community, you'll see what their plans are for your community. But focus on property rights. Just bring it down to that. Ask them. We've got on our website a resolution for the protection of citizens' property rights. And what I would suggest you do, instead of going in there and accusing them of putting Agenda 21 or any of those kind of things in place, just go in and say, ladies, gentlemen, as you're bringing these plans and these planners into the community, I've just got one question for you. What guarantees do I have that you'll protect my property rights? And they'll tell you, of course they will, hey, I'm a property owner too. And you just smile and say, I'm really happy to hear you say that, but I'd like to have it in writing, please. Put it in front of them. They won't sign it. And what that means is they are telling you they will not protect your property rights. Now you've got an issue to run a campaign against them and get them out of office. Get one of them out of office on that issue. The other ones will take alert at that and say, oh, goodness. And maybe we'll start to back off on some of this stuff.
It takes one community at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Exactly.
So do you have that sample wording on your site, that sample ordinance?
Yeah, it's on our website.
Okay, and you also have a paper there too, Why Private Property Rights Matter. And that's another critical document that ties into all of this.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Actually, what that is basically the first couple chapters of the book.
Okay.
Is what that is, and it goes in a little more detail. But yeah.
Again, friends, the website is AmericanPolicy.org, AmericanPolicy.org. And I would certainly recommend you get a copy of the book, and you can order it right through the website as well.
Yes.
Sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. This has come out recently, but it will certainly addresses the many, many issues that we've talked about on the program here in Focus. We'd encourage you to get a copy of that. Again, AmericanPolicy.org. And be informed. That's the first step, is getting the knowledge and then putting that into action as well. Tom, thank you so much for carving out time. It's good to have you in Milwaukee and be a part of the program here.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Tom DeWeese, he's been with us often on radio, on Crosstalk, on VCY America, and in town, and available here for In Focus program. So we're thanking him certainly for his involvement. But again, check out that website, AmericanPolicy.org. Friends, the issue is critical, but certainly you need to be informed and then take action. Thanks for joining us on In Focus. Good night.